All right, welcome back, Chelsea fans, to another episode of the London is Blue podcast. I, of course, am your host, Nick, and we are here for another Matt Law special, and that means we're joined by one Matt Law. How are you doing, Matt?
I'm good. It feels like we're getting really to the nitty gritty now. We've got. I always think when you get the Carabao Cup final coming up, you feel the running coming for everything. So I like it.
Yeah, it really does kind of tip after that point. February, March, that sort of
Yeah,
thing is really kind of where the winners and losers are made.
exactly.
Well, unfortunately, Chelsea are not a part of the winners right now, and I think that is, part one of where we are. Of course, would love for you, the audience, to share this episode and help us out and leave 5-star reviews and all that stuff. But as we've covered on the Monday pod, you listen to this on Wednesday. Chelsea have won 3 of their last 10 Premier League games. It's been a pretty remarkable slide from where they were previously, and that leads to a pretty difficult current conversation on where things are. Obviously, you've been a part of these matches. You've seen the dip in form. It went from, oh, okay, maybe the squad at the end of the season or the end of December got a little tired, and there's a lot of matches. I think Chelsea played 9 matches in December, so naturally there's going to be a little fatigue there to get through the festive fixtures, and it really hasn't picked up. And I think that's kind of a question in the forum guide, Matt. Where are you at with the way that Chelsea are currently playing, and how are you kind of taking all of that in?
Well, look, I mean, they're not playing well. They've not played well for a little while now. Even the West Ham. I actually thought the West Ham win was an important win, but they didn't play well in it. You've got to go back some way for them to get back to a good performance. And the worrying thing, I think, is the body language and the attitude, and also the way the manager's speaking, actually, as well. I think all those 3 things worry me as much as the performances themselves. I think this is the kind of time of the season where you can sort of get away with bad performances because it becomes all about results. Um, and therefore the mentality comes in. You've got to be able to fight your way over the line. You've got to be able to dig in. You've got to be able to find something from nowhere. You've got to be able to find big goals from nowhere. And the mentality in the last 2 games against Brighton, I've found to be really lacking. There's been, I feel, among the players what looks like a culture of blame. I think when things start to go badly for them, they're looking at each other rather than looking at themselves. I think there's an element of excuse making on the pitch where you see a lot of hands go in the air. You see a lot of people positioning where they wanted the ball, having not made any real attempt to run towards where the ball was. You see players making token efforts to get back at big moments. I've seen players make token efforts of looking like they're fighting once they go behind, but it's not real. It's not meaningful fighting. It's picking fights with the opposition rather than actually digging in. I don't like that. I think that looks for show. And that is what really worries me about this current run. As much as the form, I think you can get away with dips in form if the mentality is right. And I have not seen that. And whether that's down to them being young, whether that's down to something a little bit that runs a bit deeper that maybe Enzo has potentially hinted at the past when things were going well. And also whether it's from the manager a little bit, because I don't think the manager's messaging has been good the last few weeks. I don't think he's got the messaging quite right. And I don't know whether that is leading to a bit of an excuse culture within the squad.
Let's start with the players, because I totally co-sign the feigned attempts and the bickering and arguing. You've seen Cole Palmer get repeatedly frustrated on the pitch because I think he's, where he was asked to do a lot before, he's being asked to do almost an impossible job now, which is to beat 3 or 4 defenders and score all of the goals and get all the assists. And he's getting very, very little help. On the Monday episode, Dan and I went through the attacking statistics for the last 5 games, and the outputs are remarkably limited from everybody, including Cole, who I think has been on a bit of a dip for a couple weeks now. Um, it's an interesting place to see because I think you could understand a young squad not always knowing where to be
Mm,
or all that sort of stuff, but to see them start to argue and bicker and get frustrated with each other where the vibe early in the season seemed to be so positive and
mm,
and kind of growth oriented. you know it seems like we're more risk averse now when we play,
yeah,
and that has caused more mistakes. It's almost like the inverse of what you expect, right? Like when you become ball dominant so that you don't make a mistake, and everyone's kind of on pins and needles waiting for
yeah,
the bad thing to happen. It's like the bad thing's obviously going to happen more
yeah,
often.
yeah, yeah.
Have you noticed that?
Look, I want to address those 2 points separately because you started off with
Yeah, fair.
Cole, and I thought you made a good point on Cole about trying to do too much. Um, Old friend of the show, Nizar Kinsella, I bumped into yesterday at Tottenham, and I thought he made a really good point to me. He said that Cole at the moment reminds him of how Rooney used to get sometimes with Manchester United, and actually
Mhm.
how Kane used to get with Tottenham, and that's when the team was doing badly. They would drop into all sorts of positions, yeah, and
Put it
try and
all.
take the ball from everyone. If you look, that Brighton game the other night, Cole was dropping so deep sometimes to try and come and get the ball and try and beat a couple of men. And I like that in a way, but then in another way, obviously, you need Cole where he can hurt the opposition properly. And him dropping that deep to get the ball and try and force things obviously sort of negates his impact further forward and can stop him getting the ball further forward. And it also just shows the level of frustration that he feels like you've just sort of showed displayed the burden on his shoulder to almost try
Mhm.
and run the game himself. So I think that's where it feels Cole's at. Um, and then in terms of I do feel they're playing slightly fearfully. And weirdly, as you say, that ends up actually making things worse. You probably end up conceding more goals and creating less chances because you don't take risks anymore and you become risk averse. I do wonder whether at the back that is slightly to do with the goalkeeper situation as well. We're now into a goalkeeper rotation, which is incredibly messy. Um, this all stems back from the fact I've we've maintained on this show, and we've always sung from the same team sheet that we felt they didn't start the season with the right goalkeeper. They needed a different goalkeeper. Finally, sort of bites the bullet on Sanchez, but then that creates a problem in itself because now you're in this weird rotation. Now, does Philip Jorgensen think that if he makes a mistake, Robert Sanchez comes straight back in? Where are the
I
defense?
would if I were him, right?
Well, exactly. And is that where we're at now? Because that never ends well, by the way. That's never a good place to be. And also with the defenders, in terms of how Enzo wants to play, obviously everything is played out from the back, and that starts with a lot of the time with the goalkeeper. And then the goal, if there are doubts around the goalkeeper, doubts seep in. It feels like a vicious circle, and
Right.
the coach and the players between them don't seem to have found a way out of this vicious circle. I mean, the most obvious point of all that we can all see from a million miles is they're lacking on pitch leadership badly, and that's where having such a young team and young squad, which the club believe will have a huge upside in the long run, and I don't actually doubt that necessarily. Um, but in terms of achieving things now and next season and the season after, the flip side of what it can give you over a long period of time is clearly what we're seeing now, and that is you just need someone there to bang a few heads together and tell people what to do and what not to do, and also set standards themselves, just the way they behave. Chelsea have had different leaders. We've had the John Terry type of leadership with Chelsea, which is really telling people what to do, shouting at people, very old school, very effective, by the way. I'm not criticizing it.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Everyone would love that leader now. Do you know what I mean? But you've also got the other leadership. You've got the Aspie style of leadership. And while Aspie could be vocal and he could be aggressive, Aspie's style of leadership was way more about setting standards, about arriving on time, training well, acting correctly in the dressing room, acting correctly on the pitch, and they don't have either really of those leaders in that team or that squad. We're seeing that hugely at the moment.
I guess in your estimation, Matt, you've been around the team. Who is the like de facto leader in the squad? Is it Reese? Is it like is it Levi? I mean, we've heard about Levi's potential for leadership. Like, is it someone like Enzo Fernandez who's been vice captain, or is it someone else, or none at all?
So I do think Reese's leadership qualities have developed. When they first gave him the captaincy a couple of years ago, I didn't like it. I didn't see it in him, quite frankly. I saw an incredible player and a very good lad, but I didn't see the leader side. Now that has developed. You can see it. I've actually seen it more when he's out the team, when he's around the
Hmm,
players and he's around the
okay.
side of the pitch and you see him behind the dugout. And there are leadership qualities within that. But I don't think Reese quite has that ability yet on the pitch to inspire and to lead people out of a hole. Do you know who I have seen leadership qualities in? Is Tosin. Tosin actually does have leadership qualities, but he's in and out the team,
Right.
and he's kind of still got that new feel to him, and he just doesn't quite have that. Doesn't quite have the authority, I don't think, to be able to effectively carry it out. But he has leadership qualities. Trevor, to a certain degree, has some leadership qualities. Levi does, although I've not liked Levi the last two games. And I don't mean performances. I mean I talked to at the start. Levi's been looking for excuses for his own mistakes, and I don't like that. Levi needs to snap out of that quickly.
Hmm.
I really like Levi as a player. I've had limited dealings with him in terms of interaction with interview situations, but he's always struck me as a good lad. And I hear very good things about him, and I've seen leadership qualities in him. But the last few games, I haven't liked his character at all, to be honest with
Yeah.
you. And I, I hope he snaps out of it. I always feel that when I do these shows and I mention Enzo Fernandez, I always feel I'm being negative, which I kind of always am. And I will get accused of having some sort of problem with him. But I just don't like his leadership, because so much of his leadership strikes me as being for show. He's the guy who, we saw it against Brighton. He went round trying to pick fights with the Brighton players. When that's not leadership to me. That's not effective leadership. I saw it at Ipswich when they were losing at Ipswich. He did the same thing. Suddenly went round picking fights with players. I have seen him lead by example before. I have seen him suddenly up a performance, score a goal, do something. He has got that quality about him, but he drifts too much into the kind of ugly side of it for me.
Yeah.
Um, so I do think there are players with qualities in there, but no outstanding actual leaders.
Well, can I just like you mentioned the different styles,
Yeah,
right, of leader, and I think one thing that was kind of apparent early on in the season that I haven't seen both from any player or the manager really is that arm around the shoulder, that pick me up when I'm down, like kind of help me. Like you talked about the team kind of transitioning into finger pointing and
yeah,
demanding, and all that sort of stuff, which look, there have to be standards to meet,
yeah.
period. Right. So that's a good thing. But I remember, against Newcastle, for example, early in the season, Chelsea were kind of up against it at the end of the game. Reese makes a huge header right out to basically save the win for Chelsea. And everyone kind of picked him up off the ground, put their arm around him. It was a really positive moment.
Mm,
I remember this inflection point, and I don't know if I've seen that since that point, which is really, really odd. Like, we were clearly struggling, the team was struggling, and it was like, okay, we got this. Like, we can do this together.
mm.
Is there that kind of guy in the locker room who can put his arm around someone who's struggling and go, "Hey man, like this is just temporary. Like we're going to be okay. You're going to be okay. You're going to snap out of it." Like is there that like super positive effusive leader?
Uh, Not that I know of, to be quite honest with you. I think they can all be positive with one another. They can all, we've seen the training ground such slots when they do the hand slaps and all that, and there can be a good vibe around the place. Don't get me wrong; they can lift each other and stuff like that. But I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen the guy emerge who can really pull it all together. And as you say, if there's a little moment in a match, just try and use that moment to bring some momentum or bring something to, even with the crowd as well. Sometimes, I mean,
Mhm.
look, I'm not knocking the crowd at all. I think the crowd have been fairly good with them this season, but you sometimes see it with a player really lifting the crowd somehow with a tackle or something they do,
Yeah,
and
like pump up and
yeah, and a bit of a them against us mentality, and really kind of get it going. I mean, again, someone like Kante was very good for that. Like he certainly wasn't a shouter or anything, the quietest man on earth. But the way he played football and the way he put the effort in, A, inspired others to be better versions of themselves, but B, also just inspired the crowd. You know, the crowd would just respond to him.
Mhm.
And Chelsea's players who the crowd respond to slightly different now. Obviously, it's moments of genius from Cole. It's other bits. Jackson's got it about him to lift a crowd through delivering a ball or going in on a challenge. I do think they miss that side of Jackson at the moment, but that's the biggest. What we're talking about now as a whole, that is what has really been lacking for me recently, and I just don't know. I just don't know whether it's there because I don't know whether you have that within this. You know, the average age of the squad and the team is about 23 and a half. It has been all season. I had a look the other day over the last 10 years of the Premier League, and we're not talking about Chelsea winning the Premier League now, but like over the last 10 years of the Premier League winners have had an average age of 27 or 28.
Yeah.
It's a big difference. It's a really big difference. And to try and even I think I wrote earlier in the season that if Chelsea qualify for the Champions League or finish in the top four, since Leeds United, they'll be the youngest ever team to even finish in the top four. It just shows you how much experience and know-how goes into getting over the line. And the weird thing for Chelsea fans, and I think this is what is causing a lot of the sort of dissatisfaction and the difficulty for Chelsea fans to get their head around it, is what Chelsea are actually lacking at the moment is what a whole generation of Chelsea fans has been brought up on, that being the biggest strength. You know, all through the years of trophies, the biggest strength was the character, the leadership. That team sometimes, when the manager was getting sacked, could just manage themselves.
Yeah.
They had it all through, and they've never really had it this way around as such. And I think that is why fans do struggle with it, and I understand why fans struggle with it.
Well, I mean, you talked a little bit about Maresca, and I'll save the injury list for part two because obviously
Yeah,
that has a huge impact as to the form guide. But uh, Maresca has it's been 2 months of relatively bad form. We're
yeah,
3-10 in the Premier League. We're out of the FA Cup, and things have been kind of bleak. His messaging has in some ways been consistent, and I'll give him credit for that. And I think in others, I've noticed his messaging kind of go into excuse mode a little bit, and I think it's kind of rubbed people the wrong way. He said on Friday after what I think is the worst performance of the season. He said, "I always feel pressure, not only now, but we can say tonight was the worst performance since I arrived." He's talked in recent weeks about the goals and objectives for the season and
mm,
the expectations that he's had versus what the crowds in the stadium have or the fans online have. And I think you're looking at a guy who is in kind of a sophomore slump a little bit right now and trying to figure out how to get this team really, really firing. And I think it's more obvious now that he's feeling the pressure than ever before. Is that what you're seeing?
yeah. And it's kind of what we were waiting for a little bit when judging Maresca, because he started off so well and there was so much to praise him for and like him for. And there still is. He shouldn't just lose all of that within a bad run. But the big question is how will he respond when there's a dip? And everyone who covered Leicester and who were part of Leicester last season said he had a real problem with a mid-season slump at Leicester, and
Yep.
even in a poor division with the best team, really struggled to find a way of getting out of them. And there was a lot of warnings about this. And the problem for him is, of course, is they've got into the slump, and we haven't really seen any evidence yet of how he's going to get them out of it and what he can do differently. So it feeds into the fears of sort of some of the baggage that came with him from Leicester. Now, it's really easy to say with hindsight, but I do think a few things have cropped up recently. I see a lot online about, why were there so many players in January who were kind of keen to leave? You had Renato Vega wanted to leave, Joao Felix obviously wanted to leave, Christopher Nkunku would have left if he could, and now looks a little bit disinterested all of a sudden. Now, this hindsight's a wonderful thing, because at the time I looked at the way Maresca was using his squad with this A and B team in the Conference League and the Cups with the league, and thought, this is great for Chelsea. The fitness levels, it's really keeping up the fitness levels. With a little bit of hindsight, I think maybe his squad management is now coming to hit him between the eyes a little bit, because in creating this obviously a very set A and B team, it's caused players to want to leave. And also now with injuries, he's having to ask players like Nkunku and Dewsbury Hall, who he's kind of ignored for most of the season, or made it very clear to them, you're my B team, not my A team. And no matter really what you do, if my A team's fit, you're not getting into it. And you're asking them now to sort of get you out the slump. And it's proving more difficult to get that, particularly in Nkunku's case at the moment. And I went through it the other day, actually, and I kind of realised that, okay, Nkunku's only really scored in the Conference League a lot, but he's never really scored in the Conference League and then played in the game after. And the only real times he has is when they played like Ipswich and Southampton, which it felt like Enzo was making a statement with his team selections then of playing a bit of a B team.
Yep.
He never once, after scoring in a Conference League game, got trusted ahead of Jackson for a big league game. His substitute minutes have averaged out around sort of coming on around the 86th or the 82nd. Couple of exceptions to that, but nothing where you'd say he's been given meaningful minutes. Now, I remember when Tuchel was manager, someone at Chelsea behind the scenes, I remember writing a piece about this as well, pulled me aside one day and said, you need to look at how good this guy is managing the squad. And I said, what do you mean? Like, I don't really get where you're getting at. And they said, just look at the minutes he's giving everybody. Everybody, the squad love him. And there's a reason the squad love him, because everybody feels involved. Nobody feels left out. Nobody feels like part of a B team. They didn't say part of a B team, but nobody feels like they're in the so-called B team. And I remember doing a piece about it. And when I looked at it, he was giving people really, really meaningful minutes. Even players, sometimes even like Ross occasionally and stuff, would get on with like 20, 30 minutes to go, and other people would. And he would rotate them in for matches as well. And the person behind the scenes was saying it's genius of him. The way he keeps the squad happy and the way he manages the squad is absolutely genius. And that, in hindsight, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I am being captain hindsight at the moment, but I see problems from earlier squad management in the season when I thought he was being clever, and in actual fact, in the long run, maybe it hasn't been quite so clever. And whether that's inexperience, he's never coached in the top leagues before, he's never married up a league season with a European season, he's never tried to keep a squad of international players happy before. It could well just be inexperience, and it could be something he learns very quickly, but I think he's paying a bit of the price for that at the moment. And then just onto his messaging, I just feel whatever you have or haven't been told by the owners at the start of the season, because at the start of the season, the assumption would have been Villa are going to be there again. Tottenham are going to be there. They finished fifth last season. Surely United can't be as bad. City are going to be there. Newcastle aren't in Europe. Liverpool are going to be there. That's 6 teams before I got to Chelsea who, when they were looking at the season's goals at the start of the season, they would have factored in all those 6 teams being right in and around it. However, when you get to February and Tottenham are bottom half, Man United are bottom half, Villa are struggling to cope with the Champions League and Premier League, and they're very inconsistent, to put it kindly. Okay, you've got some replacement teams in Bournemouth and Forest, but come on, when you're in February, whatever has been said in the summer, if you've spent the majority of the season in the top four, 2 months ago you were second and looked like top four really wasn't, you know, a scary thing at all. You can't then start falling back on this is what was said to me at the start of this season. This is what I'm sorry. The goals have changed, and anything under top five. Because also, you've also got the caveat: you're going to have a lucky season. It's going to be the first year ever where 5 Premier League teams through the league season get into the Champions League. So you've also got that. You can't turn around and say, "Well, we're ahead of progress and Champions League. Well, it would be fine, but it's all about next season." You can't say that. It's bad messaging. The Champions League is there for you. It's there for Chelsea. You have to take it, and you have to talk like you're going to take it.
Well, that's kind of my point, I guess, as I'm thinking about how we are kind of perceiving him in this moment, which is like it feels like to me, and this is it might just be a party of one over here, but it feels like to me he's trying to reverse the expectations management game of where this team is because of the slide. Like if Chelsea had gone and even won half of the games over the last couple of months, they'd be clearly in the
Yeah,
top four,
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah,
probably third right now. And we haven't, right? That's only 2 more wins. It's only
yeah,
6 more points,
yeah,
and we'd be clear
yeah.
in the top 4. And it feels like to me, it's because the inexperience and because of the pressure, he's trying to go back and say, no, 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 this was never a thing. And it is because you put him there. You know what I'm
This is
saying?
it.
Like,
You put them there, and also the goals have changed. The rules of engagement have changed because there are other teams who you'd have thought would be a big problem who aren't a big problem.
right.
And there's a fifth place. It's clear as mud there's going to be a fifth place. It would take something remarkable not to be a fifth place. So, it, quite frankly, whatever was said in the summer bears no significance to anything. It's there for you. Take it. Now, my reasoning of it is one of two things. Either he's trying to decrease the pressure on himself, or number two, he doesn't feel his players can handle the pressure of being told you've got to do it.
Yeah.
Neither's a particularly
Yeah.
great scenario. If he can't handle the pressure himself, that's a problem. And if he doesn't think his players can handle the pressure, that's also a problem. But put some bloody pressure on them. Tell them it's there for you. Go and do it, guys.
Well, that's the thing
Play
is
with
like
pressure. And
you're
let's face it, it's all ridiculous anyway, because Mallow comes out the other night anyway and says our goal's the Champions League. So to try and, you know,
yeah, yeah. I was about to say like the players clearly know
exactly.
after last season and missing out by a couple of points what the ambition for the club is. I mean, the club have said it themselves. Like
Well,
the
read
owners have said
go back to the program at the end of last season, Bournemouth final game when the owners set out all of their goals. We looked at it and thought, whether you agreed with it or not, Pochettino's probably cooked if you're going alongside these set rules. And how Maresca is talking doesn't talk to what the owners put in black and white in the program for everybody. I'm
I know.
sorry, I don't quite know. I obviously don't know what Maresca has been told in public, but I've always felt it's clear as mud that the goal this season is Champions League. I haven't been expressly told that because they're not going to tell someone like me this is our goal, but it's obvious, and I just don't get it. I don't like it. It feels very un-Chelsea like, um, and when we talk about players having excuses and whatnot, it feels like it all just feeds into that whole thing.
Well, I guess my next logical place to go with this, Matt, is that he is a very principled manager in the way that he wants to play. He has said it. He has instilled this play style, this
Yeah.
high press, this man-to-man marking, this, he asks a lot of different players, right? My argument on the Monday pod is like it feels like whereas that worked early in the season, maybe caught some teams off guard, that they're pretty well prepared for it now. And perhaps with the players available, we'll talk about injuries next, that he's not maximizing the skills and talents of the players that he actually has available. And this is, thanks to The Athletic for putting this out, Chelsea have made the third fewest in-game formation changes in the Premier League this season, which is not a surprise to anyone who watches us, right? It's Man United at one time they've switched formations, Ipswich Town with 4, and then we are tied with Bournemouth and Liverpool on 5 times where the in-game shape has shifted, and the team with the most is ahead of Chelsea and Nottingham Forest on 19,
Nottingham
which
Forest,
is
that surprises me.
yeah.
I thought
So
Forest were quite a set team. That really surprises me.
and again, this doesn't mean anything except for the fact that I think there are a lot of people like myself looking for, we're doing
Yeah.
the same thing over and over and expecting different results, and those results aren't necessarily coming. And it's been a large enough sample size now to go, all right, what's the adjustment going to be? Do you see an adjustment coming, or is it going to be stubborn play through?
Wow. I mean, you've got to remember that I also cover Tottenham, who have the most stubborn manager in terms of. So
It's
I'm
Tottenham have
used to this kind of
11
stuff.
in-game formation. Like they have 7 or 6 more than Chelsea do. So
Wow,
that's yeah.
that surprises me as well. I'm kind of I feel like I'm very used to this conversation. Look, I don't think they will. I think largely he will continue to play and set the team out in the way he has all season, and I think that has become an issue with the injuries. Clearly, I know we're not onto the injuries yet, but I think when he has all his players available, i.e., Wes Fofana in defence makes a huge difference in terms of what they can do coming out from the back. Lavia makes a massive difference into how the midfield works, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
I do think, and again, Captain Hindsight here, but it does lead me to think is why, and you've discussed this on the pod sometimes, why at various points earlier in the season, and obviously it's before the end of January now, had you not put Cole back onto the right and tried Nkunku or Joao behind and played all three instead of sticking with the very sort of obvious wingers who were struggling with their output and see whether that upped output. I don't see a big stylistic change coming. Lots of managers don't like stylistic changes these days. I think he will try and get through by pursuing what he would say has got him here and trying to find a way to make it clear. Clearly, at the top of the pitch, they have to. At the very top of the pitch, they will have to do something differently because someone put a great highlights reel on social media the other day of the way Nicholas Jackson will pick up the ball with either his back to goal or sort of scrap and win it in the middle of the pitch and bypass his way through an area of the pitch to get them up right by the penalty area, basically, and then they can play from there. And they don't have that now. And also, Nicholas will run in behind. So he's got to
every
find,
every minute he'll make a run in
yeah.
behind. Like
So
he
he's
just does
he's
all the unselfish runs. Like
so he's got to find a different way at the very top of the pitch. He's got to find a solution, and he certainly hasn't found it yet. He's got all week to work on it this week ahead of Villa. If we don't see anything different right at the top end of the pitch, it doesn't have to be different personnel, but just a different way of trying to unpick things. I think that would be a red flag and a worry for the rest of the season for sure.
yeah, I mean, let's talk about the injuries. Obviously, what was a short injury list for a lot of the season has kind of resumed its standard length from the last couple of years. Obviously, Mark Guiu and Nicholas Jackson picked up an injury in the same game on deadline day. Terrible luck,
Yeah.
but also, we'll talk about the planning and everything that went into that. So it looks like they're both out for a decent amount of time, at least until April, but we'll see. Muscular problems are notoriously finicky, as we've learned. Romeo Lavia hasn't been seen since December, and
Mm.
I, whatever that is going to be is going to be. Wes Fofana potentially could be seen. I think you mentioned this one of our last pods that Maresca might have misspoke around him. It looks like we will see him before hopefully too long with his injury. Benoit is a mystery injury. Benoit Badiashile. He said Benoit is exactly the same as Romeo, and we have no idea about either. Malo Gusto had a small tweak, but will be okay. And then Noni Madueke, latest hamstring injury pickup. It looked pretty bad. He looked pretty distraught after it happened. It leaves you real thin.
It does, and also that we've seen. Someone might correct me on this. I think the last time that Fofana, Lavia, and Jackson all started together was when Chelsea beat Villa 3-0 at home back in December. A really good performance. Villa weren't particularly good that day, but a really good performance from Chelsea. And it's probably never looked as good since, to be honest with you. Though that was massive. I mean, I think Caicedo played in that slightly weird right back role that day because Lavia could play in the middle. But those three mixed in with Caicedo and Cole, having all those players in the same starting 11 is huge for Chelsea. We haven't really seen it since then, and I can't recall a better performance since then. So that's how key it all is. I mean, look, the big problem is that obviously Jackson's goals and assists. I know he was on a barren run, but he still makes things happen. He still would have scored more goals. He does create things. He creates havoc. He also creates assists. Then, so you've got Cole, who's the top scorer. You've got Jackson, who's the second top scorer. If we're just taking league, let's take Conference League out of it. And then I think the third top scorer after that is Noni.
It is. Yeah. So you go from, I think it's 20 to 14. Just total goal contributions.
Yeah.
It's Cole at 20 something, Nico at 14, and then Noni at 10. Yeah. It's those three.
And Noni has that sort of quality as well, where he can, for all his up and down in matches and when he can go disappearing, he does have the ability to create something out of nothing. He can beat his man. He can suddenly skin someone. He can also just whack one in as well. And so you're missing that. Now, I will argue till the cows come home that they've been unlucky on the striker front. I know lots of people will throw the planning at me, but I will argue till the absolute cows come home that I believe, and people are allowed alternative opinions, clearly. I think they've just been incredibly unlucky on the striker front. But they're paying for it. They are paying for it. And their key injuries all in the three up top, Guy, Jackson, and Noni. The fact they're all in basically the same area is a big problem for them.
I mean, let me take the alternate view here.
Yeah, let's, because it would be fun to do this. I think we should do this.
I can agree that it's horrific luck, and I do think that the teams that play on transfer deadline day are at a distinct disadvantage.
For sure. It shouldn't happen. I mean, it's easy to say now because it's Chelsea, but it shouldn't happen. It's
but just like broad rule moving forward, if you have a transfer deadline day, let's figure out a way to not have teams be at a competitive disadvantage, because I think that's clearly what happened here. If that injury happens 2 days before deadline day, you can go do something about it. If it happens.
And Maresca made that clear. It's easy to say now. People will say, "Oh, it's easy for him to say now," but Maresca made that clear in his last press conference. If that injury had happened 24 hours or 48 hours earlier, they would have tried to do something. Those two injuries, they would have tried to do something. I don't know what they could have done, but they would have tried.
But my planning view, and the reason why I'm going to be critical here of the sporting structure, is because you've been short in this position all season. Now, you've gotten away with it for a large part, but in the last couple of months, Nico's obviously not been performing at his top level. And the other attackers, when those chances haven't gone into the net, the team is still young and impressionable. And I think they've felt the added pressure on their shoulders to do more. And they have failed as well, right? Like your whole attacking, midfield and winger setup is not really doing the job. And if you were a sporting director, obviously you don't want to have to go buy a striker in January. I get that. but you don't have to go buy a big name striker in January to make a difference in the rest of the season. And if you saw the slide or the fact that maybe Nico needed a little bit of real competition to get back into firing form, that would have been 25, 30 million pounds well spent in my eyes, because the goal, as we have discussed, is to get into that top four, top five, and secure Champions League football, which opens a whole lot more doors for you than anything else. It's the biggest thing that Chelsea can do outside of winning the Club World
Yeah.
Cup this summer. So I guess that is my criticism of the planning is this wasn't just Nico gets injured and was in 20 goal scoring form and was doing great. It's that Nico had been kind of struggling for goals for a minute, and then you didn't do anything, and then he gets hurt, and so it looks like bad luck, but I actually think it's bad planning.
See, I would counter that by I don't think there was a deal there for them. I mean, I don't think it's just them saying this, because they were saying this when both strikers were fit. They were looking. They did look at situations. We know they looked at situations. Now, Marmoush went to City. Marmoush would be a good signing for Chelsea, but when City are in for Marmoush, he's not going anywhere else. So for me, Marmoush isn't realistic for Chelsea, because City are there. City are doing that one. That's that. John Duran goes to Saudi Arabia. Do any Chelsea fans, hand on heart, think Chelsea should have paid upwards of £70 million for John Duran in the January transfer window? They might do. There might be people out there that do. Absolutely fine. No problem at all. I just don't know who they looked at Garnacho in terms of trying to find a solution on the wing. I watched Garnacho at Tottenham yesterday, missed 3 big chances, and quite frankly, I was sat there thinking, thank God Chelsea didn't go and spend 40, 50 million on Garnacho, because that would be a deal that came back and bit them. Now, I've preached a lot over the years with Chelsea about doing nothing is better, and doing nothing with the view of doing something good in a summer window is better than the emergency January. We've had it with Chelsea in the past with Pato. Higuain was probably one of the big ones. I just don't see where the deal was for Chelsea, and I honestly thought they're doing the right thing. With a day or two of the window to go, when I started to think they're not going to end up doing a winger or a striker. I never really thought they'd do a striker because I didn't see a deal there. I honestly thought, the God's honest truth, they're doing the right thing. Thank God they're not going and paying stupid money for a John Duran or someone else I'm not sure about. Thank God they've learned the lessons from 2 Januaries ago, when they went and spent all that money in a blind panic to try and get in the Champions League, when they thought the Champions League was still there, and they spent it on Mudryk and Fernandes and everybody because they thought they could still win the Champions League or somehow get into the Champions League. And I actually saw it as a sign of progress. I've got to be honest, and I honestly did. With a couple of days of transfer window to go, I thought this is good. This is clear evidence that they are learning from their mistakes. Now, obviously, the minute they get the 2 strikers injured, there is a problem. And it's clear that people can level the planning at them. But I'd be hypocritical to criticise them for something that I thought was a good thing. Now, what they should have done back in the summer is a different debate. Whether you think that Guy should be the number 2 striker back in the summer, and should they have brought in a strike, but that for me is a separate debate to where we're at in terms of the planning on the January window and where Chelsea find themselves now. And just to add, before you jump in on me, I hear what you're saying, that there were signs that they were short in terms of output numbers amongst their forwards. But I would also counter that by saying there's got to be at some point where the manager and the players themselves have to get it out of them, because there aren't many Premier League teams who have more than 2 out and out strikers, whether you think they're good, bad, and indifferent. And there's certainly not many Premier League teams who have then this sort of array of forwards, when Joao was still at the club, of Nkunku, Joao, Cole, who can play around, and Noni and everybody else, who can play around them and should be providing goals and assists around them. I mean, how many do you actually keep going and getting and adding and adding and adding?
So I think there's two counterpoints to that. The first counterpoint is your club, Villa, did some smart loan business in January that wasn't a cost burden and was a short term thing, right? Getting Marco Asensio for a loan deal is a smart thing to do. Now, is he an out and out striker? Is he going to replace Nico Jackson the way that Nico Jackson plays? No, but there are deals out there. I have to believe there are deals out there for players who want to get away, just like Joao Felix did the other way, to come in. And the second thing is you didn't have to send Joao Felix away. You simply didn't. And
Well, well,
it
well,
looks silly now that you've done that, even if he wasn't my favorite personal player. It looks very, very naive.
and I hear that. On Joao Felix, I my 2 points on Joao Felix would be one, I still don't know why they signed him in the summer. Separate debate, admittedly. I still don't know why
Hold
they
it.
did. Yeah.
I think it's my least favorite signing that they've done.
And I feel like a lot of progress has been made, and I get the reason behind a lot of it, but the Joao Felix one, I still don't get. Secondly, though, on that point, is the situation came to be in Joao Felix. Does that come back to my squad management issue with the manager as well? Because everything we are hearing and told, and the noises from what Joao Felix has said since he's been from Milan, is Joao Felix was very definite that he wanted to leave Chelsea in January. So, A, why have you signed him if you're not going to use him? And B, has the manager got to take a little bit of responsibility there in that Joao Felix was obviously not made to feel part of what the manager was doing and therefore wanted to leave? It can't always all just be about planning. Now, I wrote this the other day. The point at which those two strikers get injured with an hour of the transfer window left to go, with Joao Felix in Milan,
Scoring. Yeah.
literally. Well, I think it was the next day or something he scored, but he was having his medical or something. He was already in Milan. Are you realistic? Some people would say yes to this. Fine. It's a big call to say you are just going to literally pull the plug on him and say, Joao, you're coming back. And when you've still got Nkunku, you've still got Palmer, you've still got Madueke, you've still got all the others. It's a big call. It's a debate. It's a legitimate debate. Don't get me wrong. I don't consider myself to be right. I just have my opinion.
I so I understand, especially a player of, like him who has been shipped around a lot. And I'll just talk about Felix in particular. He wants to be loved so bad.
Mm.
He is one, like, he's just one of those guys.
Yeah, yeah, you can see it.
He's desperate for it. And I also think you're being paid a shit ton of money to do a job. And sometimes it doesn't work out. And sometimes it does. And I think if he would have been here on deadline day, if he would have been at Chelsea, I think he would be playing up top right now. Like,
Mm.
no doubt in my mind. I think we talked about that. And Kunku's not that guy and won't be that guy. Like, he can't get into a game right now at
Mm.
all. He can't even get touches.
Mm.
Felix can. Felix has
Yeah.
shown the ability to. I think it would have showed a commitment the other way and would have endeared him to the fan base, even if he's certainly not a perfect player. He's certainly not a like for like replacement for Nico
Mm.
Jackson or any of that stuff. These are not. He's not my favorite player, very clearly. But I think part of it's just getting on with it and doing a job.
And
And
that is a legitimate view. I can't argue against that because that is a legitimate view. There's a legitimate argument that like you say, you're paying him a shit ton of money. He's a professional footballer. He wants to play minutes, and you say, "Sorry, you're our employee. You're staying, and you're going to play." That is a perfectly. I can't argue against that. But they are where they are. They are where they are. My personal opinion is they are where they are in terms of striker, predominantly for bad luck. Other people have alternative views to that. And there are debates within it about whether Guy should have even been the backup anyway, whether it should have been someone else. There are lots of different spin-off debates. But they are where they are. And let me just put it this way. There are managers in the Premier League who have been dealing with tougher situations with worse squads.
No doubt.
And done a better job of coping with it than Enzo Maresca has so far.
So it does lead us to like what comes next with the
because
squad,
Bournemouth have had a load of injuries recently.
Mm-hmm.
They've coped incredibly with it. Clubs apart from Liverpool, and there's a reason why Liverpool probably are clear where they're clear. Liverpool haven't had the injuries. They have been fortunate with injuries. And if this gets clipped up on social media and Liverpool fans see me saying it, they're going to kill me and I'm going to have a terrible week. But Liverpool have been fortunate with injuries. Everybody else has had key injuries through the season. Arsenal have. You know, they managed to make something work with Marino coming on the other day. Villa, I know Villa are down in ninth at the moment, so it's not like they're challenging up where Chelsea are at the moment. Villa have had injuries to their centre-backs all season, coped with it, got through in the Champions League, coped with it to a degree. Every single... Forest probably haven't, actually. Liverpool and Forest haven't. But all the other managers, City have had some terrible injuries. You've got to cope with it. You've got to cope with it. Chelsea haven't had it any worse than anybody else. And they have, in my opinion, they have the squad to get over the line. And if they don't get over the line, in my opinion, it's on the manager.
One of the last times we talked, we kind of graded out the position groups and you know where they were and all that sort of stuff. But you know, for a majority of the next, let's just call it month and a half. So basically, after we are there, so that'll be the Tottenham game on April 2nd. We'll just put the marker down. So Tottenham on April 2nd is basically the gap between now and then, month and a half roughly.
Yeah.
You have one healthy left winger in Jadon Sancho. You have one healthy right winger in Pedro Neto. You have 0 healthy strikers, like formal strikers.
Out and out strikers, yeah.
You have 2 10s available in Palmer and Nkunku. You have one left-sided midfielder in Enzo Fernandez. You have one right-sided midfielder in Moises Caicedo, and wherever Dewsbury Hall fits in, he fits in. You have Marc Cucurella as your left back with no immediate replacement there, which is frightening. You have Colwill as your left center back. You have Chalobah and Tosin as right center back options. And you have Reece James, Malagusto, and Achembong as your right back options. Maybe Achembong can slot into center back as well. Goalkeepers, Sanchez and Jorgensen, obviously rotating in whatever form.
Mm.
The rest are injured, out, or suspended. How do you get the best out of that?
I mean, you've just got to work with what you've got. I don't know how to explain.
Ty George. You have Ty George on the left, who I think potentially is one to mark. This could be an opportunity for him.
You've got to. I mean, this sounds terribly simplistic. You have got to find a way within that to get the best out of Cole again, because quite frankly, if you can get the best out of Cole or anywhere near the best out of Cole, he'll get you over the line on his own. He's that good. You need a little bit of luck around the injuries, like everybody does. But even if you don't get luck, if Cucurella gets injured, there are players who can play there. You know, Gusto can play over that side if need be. It's not perfect. Colwill can fill in on that side if need be. It's not perfect. But other clubs are having to do imperfect things at the moment. And you just have to it's about finding a way, which is what he hasn't proved he can do at the moment. It's about finding a way. If you're a team that has to play really well to win games, it's difficult for you because not many teams play really well across an entire season with the schedule as it is and with the amount of injuries that there are at these days in the league. So it's about finding a way. I watched Liverpool yesterday. Liverpool were poor yesterday against Wolves, awful in the second half, but they found a way. And Liverpool have found a way in a lot of games. You feel that is coming for City. Just you feel in the league that that's coming for City. I feel that even though Newcastle have had a little wobble, that they are a team, particularly in no European football with Eddie Howe. They don't always play lovely football, great football, but he's another one with that squad. They find a way, and Enzo's going to have to find a way. I wrote a piece that went out today that they're going to need between 64 and 68 points to be sure of fifth place. So they're going to need between 21 and 25 more points. If it's the top end, 25 looks tough. If it's the bottom end and it's 21, you'd hope they could do it. Now,
It's still tough. We did the math on the Monday pod. The results are you have to win the
well,
winnables, and you
their
have to
first
get.
their first 13 Premier League games of the season, which went up to Villa 3-0, up to and including Villa 3-0, which is why Villa's quite a nice way to hang this. They got 25 points out of those 13 games of the season. From that Villa 3-0, if you take it the other way and go 13 from that Villa 3-0 up to now, they're down on about 21, something like that. And obviously, that includes a nice section where they're doing well, and then it includes a horrible section where they're winning 2 out of 9 or 3 out of 10 or whatever. So it's doable. They've shown it's doable, but it's tough. And I've got to say, I think the Villa game is massive. I think that because they play Southampton and Leicester at home after Villa, I think either side of the international break. You've got to have that. I mean, you've got to beat Southampton and Leicester at home. You've got to beat that. You've got to win those games. If they can pick up a win somehow at Villa, which I know Chelsea fans don't fancy at the moment, but then if you speak to Villa fans don't really fancy Villa winning many games at the moment either. If they can somehow find a way to win that match, whether it's the ugliest match ever, the luckiest match ever, or whatever, that will be huge. Similarly, if they lose that match, that points total going down to the 12 games and who they've still got to play starts to look really, really difficult, particularly when you factor in injuries and things. So I've got to say, I don't like building things up generally because I think people get carried away with it. But I think the Villa match this weekend is massive for Chelsea's top 4, top 5 hopes. Absolutely massive. And also, if they beat Villa at Villa Park, I think they'll knock Villa out of it. Because Villa are ninth at the moment. They're 5 points behind Chelsea. There can obviously be a swing here. If Villa are, Villa have got to play Liverpool in midweek, which obviously complicates the swing ratio a little bit. But if Chelsea were to go 8 points above Villa with 12 games to go, that for me knocks Villa out of the equation. So you can knock one out of the equation as well. Flip it round and you can let Villa back into it. At the moment, Villa don't look like they're in the race. Flip it round and Villa beat Chelsea. Villa are back in it again. It's massive, absolutely massive. And it's also massive for the mood because, again, social media, it's difficult to gauge off social media. But the mood going into this Villa game feels like the mood when Chelsea went to Villa in the FA Cup on the back of the Wolves defeat at home. It was mutinous. The crowd weren't sure about Pochettino. They weren't sure about the ownership. They weren't sure about the players.
Yeah.
And that win at Villa Park in the FA Cup, even though they still went on to lose the Carabao Cup final in circumstances that they shouldn't have lost it in. But in terms of just the momentum and the form and the switch in feeling among the fans, it was huge. And it feels on that precipice again. It feels similar where the fans are either going to really go for them and really decide they don't like this manager and that they're sick of this team and they're sick of these owners, or all of a sudden a win, everyone just feels a bit more back on side. And like I say, you've got Southampton and Leicester coming up. Great chance then to make it 3 on the bounce. It just feels on such a knife edge at the moment.
Which is why it's obviously going to be a draw, and then we'll just postpone the feeling
Well,
until
a draw bounces it on. A draw doesn't really, a draw probably means Villa would struggle to get back in. It's no good for Villa. They need to win their home games. In terms of Chelsea, all it does is bounce this feeling on a couple more. What it would do if it's a draw is it just puts a bit more pressure on some of those home games that you can't afford even a draw in some of them.
Yeah, it's a
It,
lot of
it's
pressure.
it's going to be tight. They're going to play with pressure, and it's going to be tight. Let's face it.
Well, and to add to the pressure, I don't know if this will come together in any real way, but there is a growing uh, protest being scheduled for the Southampton game at home. Look, there have been real legitimate protests for the Super League and stuff
Yeah.
like that at Chelsea before. And then there have been fan organized protests that have not gone anywhere. I don't know where this is going to go. It seems I understand the frustration. It also seems like just yelling at for the sake of it right now without any real purpose or direction. You're going to be at the Southampton game. I mean, how do you think that's going to go?
Well, again, this is why Villa's massive. If they go to Villa Park and win, I'll bet you a fair amount of money that protest doesn't go very far if they've just beaten Villa at Villa Park with 2 home games to come, because the pitch will look a lot rosier. I know that there are concerns away from the results and away, and I think, you know, people want to protest about other things than results of football. I get it, and I'm really not trying to belittle it, but I do think the mood will shift considerably again if they win at Villa Park. Now, if they lose at Villa Park, that what feels at the moment like a protest. Is it a protest? Isn't it a protest? Will it happen? Won't it happen? If they lose at Villa Park, all of a sudden there might be a bit more momentum and wind behind that. My point on this is I fully stand up for fans' rights to
So,
protest
yeah.
completely, and I would never dare to tell another club's fans what they should or what they shouldn't do. My point would be, while in the context of the league, and obviously the Conference League, and I don't know how much people care about that. In the context of the league, while there is still so much still at stake, why jump at something now? At the moment that something isn't at stake, I understand it a bit more. Like Tottenham fans have just protested. Tottenham can't. Well, they can win the Europa League. So I'm wrong. Actually, there is something still at stake with Tottenham, but their dissatisfaction has maybe gone on longer. But the Chelsea one at the moment to me just feels like, rewind 2 months, they were second. I probably don't feel they're going to get back their form, although I still think if you were to offer me a bet, I would say I think they'll finish in the top 5 and get Champions League. But it could
Oh
still
man.
go. I do. It still could go either way. So why jump at something while it could go either way? Why not wait to see which way it actually goes?
There's been a bunch of discussion about this one in particular because, like, again, the frustration is high. The results have been poor. There's been a lot of own goals by this ownership, and I think that they're well within their rights to want to organize some formal protest if the communication channels that are currently available to them, i.e., the shadow board, i.e., the supporters trust, i.e., the pitch owners, are just simply not working. Right. I think the points that have been made on the other side of this are the protest is about the ownership getting out of the club, i.e., selling the club. And I think most people are going to tell you that's just simply not going to happen.
Mm.
Like there's stuff that you can protest and I think be effective protesting. And then there's like, we hate the world. And, it's just like, I don't know if it's direct enough or clear enough on the message as to what you really hope will happen. But unless someone comes along with, £4 billion and advances the clock 5 years, it doesn't feel like we're anywhere near a point where they could even sell it, even if they wanted to, which maybe they do. So that's the thing that I'm a little bit confused by. Is like, what is this? What is this going to accomplish other than potentially just getting attention and making some folks look bad?
Yeah, look. Like I say, I wouldn't want to belittle anyone's right to protest and right to have a voice, and if that's
Absolutely
how,
not. I just
and
like don't. I'm
and
trying to
and,
understand it.
and I do think to broaden it out a little bit, there's a modern football thing here at stake a little bit, because you've got Tottenham fans protesting, West Ham fans have protested all season. Leicester City fans protested the other day. And this is because lots of football fans feel disenfranchised by rising ticket prices, by football feeling as though it's being taken away from people who've been going all their life, and people just literally feeling like they don't have a voice anymore and that they're being ignored. And that's a wider football issue. And I am completely in agreement with a lot of it. And but my club Villa hasn't got to a point where fans have protested, but there's been a lot of anger about Champions League ticket prices and various other things that are boring to fans of other clubs. But there's a lot of dissatisfaction at clubs, at ownerships of decisions, and people not feeling they've had a voice. And that is a broader modern football issue. And it's not a surprise that part of Chelsea's problem at the moment is caught up in that. And it's a real shame. But I mean, the whole mood swing and where this slight sort of feeling of potential mutiny goes, I mean, it does feel like massively resting on how this weekend goes, given recent results. And what I would also say is, I think Maresca's got to get his messaging right this week. I think he's got it
Yeah.
wrong the last few weeks. They've got to work hard with him this week behind the scenes about his messaging, because he needs to be on point. He really needs to be on point, because I think that's just caused confusion and anger, and had accusations thrown around about the club not being ambitious anymore, and also it just has been against what, like I say, what the owners wrote down in the articles, what players are saying, what it's just caused a mess.
Yeah,
He
everyone has
needs to get
to tighten up.
yeah, he needs to get his messaging right on point this week. I think it's a big week. Jose Mourinho and Alex Ferguson very much went by the point that football matches start at the press conference. And they did. And it sounds ridiculous. I know it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like we're far too much importance of our own good that we're claiming that we have any part of this. But they would start the match in the pre-match press conference. That's where they would start. And they always felt that there was an early win or loss to be had there. And Maresca needs to get a win on his messaging this week.
Well, for those who are going to be in New Orleans at Blues Day with us, enjoying some Mardi Gras vibes, we will be with the Carefree Louisiana crew watching the Villa game. We will also be out at the parades after. So come and join us, have some fun. And thank you, Matt, for a wonderful special. We'll talk about the commercial aspects next week, which is a whole other thing that I just want to give time and space for us to kind of prepare for,
Yeah.
and do that one right. But lots going on as always. Chelsea are a club that just love the drama, and that's where we currently sit. So until next time, Chelsea fans, you know what to do. Keep the blue flag flying high.